Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats, podcast episode number 139. I'm your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan. If you can't get it done, well, it probably will be hard for anybody to get her done. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden vessels around the world. Thanks for joining me today, folks. It is September 2nd here. When I'm recording this, this will be published on September 4th. Episode number 139, and thanks for joining me today. We're going to have a fun time as usual. Today's featured segment is an interview I did with Colin Angus. Colin is an amazing guy. He and his wife, Julie, are adventurers, and they have done things like circumnavigate the globe completely by human power, designed rowboats that will hold bicycles and trailers so they can be fully self-supported. They just made a trip from Scotland, I believe it was, to Syria, and where there was water available, they would row their rowboat, and when there was land, they would take their trailer and their bikes out of the rowboat and pull their boat behind their bicycles. So, pretty amazing couple. Anyway, I had a chance to interview Colin at the Pocket Yacht Palooza in July. And Colin talks about some of his adventures and how he got into boating, and it's really cool. And check out their website, angusadventures.com. In 2007, Colin and Julie were named National Geographic Adventurers of the Year. So anyway, stick around for that interview. It's going to be a lot of fun. Well, as far as news this week, for the last couple weeks, I finished repainting and cleaning up my door and getting her all ready for sale. And Thursday, I will take her to Port Townsend for the Wooden Boat Festival, which is September 5th through the 7th in Port Townsend, Washington. And she will be for sale there. And I'm asking $3,600 for her. She's a 14-foot semi-dory, looks pretty much brand new, complete repaint inside and out, and re-oiled all the gunnels. Motor's got a fresh tune-up. It's got a 15-horse Merc 2-stroke that I bought new in the year 2000. Comes with a galvanized King trailer and a canvas cover for the boat and some oars and a partially completed sail rig. So anyway, if you come into Port Townsend this week, look me up. I'll be in one of the two small boat areas, either out on the point or at the Commons right in front of the Northwest Maritime Center. So I'm pretty excited to show my boat and hopefully get her sold. And I can take that money and finish the Scamp that I purchased last year that had been partially started. And speaking of the festival, I will be teaching my class, Get in the Wooden Boat Game, a guide for building your first boat, and that'll be Friday at noon in one of the small classrooms in the Maritime Center. So if you get a chance to come by and say hi, that would be awesome. I'm really looking forward to the festival. I'm going to be going Thursday through Sunday. I'm planning on doing lots of interviews, and actually got some stuff lined up already. I'm going to interview Lynn and Larry Party for the second time. We're going to talk about some circumnavigation and selecting a vessel and some other fun stuff. And Jay Bedford, who's a designer, and I've got some other people lined up also. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to take pictures and have a grand old time. And hope to see you there. And if you can't find me, just call me on my cell, 425-319-7800. I do send out an electronic newsletter once every month or so. And I've got some new subscribers to that. David Wing Kovarik, Dale Simonson, Ron Pike, Jay Harris, Michael Davidson, Bob Barnett, and Bob Lamb. Thanks for signing up for the newsletter. If you would like to sign up, you can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. Had to think about that for a second. And give me your first, last name, email address, and you'll get the free newsletter also. Also, I wanted to mention I am changing my email address. It has been dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. I will continue to monitor that address, but I've been overwhelmed with spam there, and I'm having a hard time getting spam filters to work right. And I don't want to pay for a spam filter, so my new email address is going to be woodenboatdan@gmail.com. So that's how you can contact me, woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Okay, well, we're going to move on to the interview with Colin. It's a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy it. So let's roll the tape. Take it away, Colin. Okay, it's July 19th, 2014. I am sitting with Colin Angus. Colin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So Colin and I just met here a few minutes ago, actually. We're here at the Pocket Yacht Palooza, and Colin's got one of his rowboats here, and you're also speaking tonight. So give us a little background, a little biography on yourself, Colin.
Okay, well, my background is kind of a convoluted background, but I guess to really get into it, I'll take you back to my childhood. I was brought up in Port Alberni, which is on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to get into any kind of boating there. And I was brought up as a single mom with 4 kids. So my way of travel was vicariously. I loved to read books about adventures, and generally they're about boats, whether going down to Antarctica, the exploits of Shackleton, or the Kon-Tiki voyage where they crossed the Pacific in a log boat. Or I also loved the survival stories when people are, in sailboats and they sink and they end up living for 72 days or whatever it may be in a life raft.
Yeah.
And but I never really thought that I would be doing anything like that. And then one day I read a book. It was about an American kid. His name was Robin Lee Graham, who was the youngest to sail around the world by himself.
In the Dove.
Yeah, in Dove.
I read the Dove.
I was 12 years old when I read that, and I was so inspired. I just thought it sounded magical. And the thing was different than all the other expeditions I read about in that book is, the others, came from means, they knew the right people. And with Robin Lee Graham, it just seemed like he had this dream, this ambition, and somehow against all odds, he made it happen. So after I read that book, I decided I'm going to do that. I'm going to get a sailboat and just sail off into the high seas. And I told my mom and I told friends, and invariably they would smile. Sure, a 12-year-old kid who's never been on a boat in his life. And but I really couldn't understand why it couldn't be done. And I started saving up my paper route money. I was reading all the books I could get my hands on offshore sailing. And then in grade 11, I met a friend. His name was Dan Odette, and he was the first person that got really excited about this idea too. So it wasn't long before we started planning the trip together. And shortly after getting out of high school, we pooled our savings and bought a beat-up old sailboat and sailed away from Canada. So that was the beginning of our adventure.
What kind of boat did you buy, Colin?
It was a Huntingford, which Huntingford 27. So Stan Huntingford's the designer. He generally makes bigger boats, sort of motor cruiser styles, sort of the older design, full keeled, very heavy boats. Ours was full keel, had a single-cylinder Saab diesel. And it was not a performance boat by any means, but it was very seaworthy. And we had just got by on the bare bones, first of all. We didn't have a life raft or a self-steering system or anything. So we left from Canada and we sailed down to San Francisco, where we spent quite a few months working, under the table, of course, being the Canadians that we were. I hope Customs isn't out there listening. and so we saved up enough money down there. We were just varnishing and doing boat work until we could buy luxuries like a life raft and this Aries self-steering system and some piles of food. And then we sailed away from there and went down to Mexico and then across to French Polynesia. And every place we got to, we were just working along the way. So we got to French Polynesia and we were completely broke. And we both got jobs on a luxury yacht. It was the Virginian, which is owned by John Kluge, who back then was one of the richest people in the world. And so it was quite exciting going from, our little cockroach-ridden 27-footer to this glossy, gleamy boat and working as deckhands there. And I actually stayed on for 9 months. And I saved up enough money to buy out Dan's half of the Ondine. And he stayed on the Virginian for another few years. So I flew back and back to my boat and spent another 3 years just sailing around the South Pacific, so through Tonga, Fiji, New Zealand, Australia. Spent a lot of time time in different places, in particular Australia, New Zealand, always having to replenish the kitty. So working in all sorts of odd jobs along the way. I counted the other day. I think it was like 23 different jobs I did, from digging graves to painting, lots of boat work, of course, working in Subway restaurant, picking fruits and vegetables, and My mother is Scottish. You hear about young people, who go traveling and they're like, oh yeah, I was in Europe and I ran out of money and I had to phone my parents up for the second time. My mother, I knew, would never send a penny. So you feel you're on your own. So when we arrived, for example, in French Polynesia with just $200 each, you feel, to even get into French Polynesia actually was a bit of a challenge, because we heard in advance that there, because they've had a lot of sort of skint, penniless sailors wrecking their boats, and they don't have the money to fly out, they've changed their rules so that to get a visa, you need to pay a deposit, which is equivalent to your flight out. Back then it was really quite pricey. This is in the early 90s. I think it was like $1,500 each. Flights were really expensive. And of course we didn't have that money. And we knew before we left Mexico we had this problem. However, we'd heard a rumor, and it was just a rumor, that if you tried paying with credit card, when you reach Marquesas, they don't have credit card processing facilities. So now we didn't have credit cards even, but we thought, well, we'll say we want to pay with credit cards, and hopefully what they do then is they give you a temporary cruising permit and allow you to sail on to Tahiti, where they can process credit cards, but the temporary permit's 2 months, so it'd be long enough for us to cruise all of French Polynesia, and then we'd go there last. And but it was nerve-wracking sailing across an ocean. You've run out of food, you've run out of pretty much everything, you've got $200 in your pocket, and you're strolling up to the gendarme's office. And so my friend Dan spoke French. He was from Quebec. And so I still remember that moment. We're just like so nervous. And he's like, "Okay, so you boys know about the fee you have to pay, temporary fee, which you get back when you leave." And they're like, "Oh yeah, we want to pay with our credit card." And Dan was reaching into his wallet. He said, "Oh, that's okay. If you're going to pay with credit card, I can give you a temporary permit." So fortunately, we were able to. That worked out all right. Okay. And so we worked there for a resort, just doing some laboring work, and then, like I said, working in the Virginian. But that was very interesting for me. Is just an eye-opener to go from being a little boy in Port Alberni, never traveling, and just having that whole world out there, and suddenly you're the captain of your own destiny. And I loved boats. Boats in a way is kind of in my blood. My father was a sea captain, and I never met him. He left before I was born, but he was in the Scottish Merchant Navy and was plying the world in cargo vessels. And my family's both my mother and father are from the north of Scotland, where they're fishermen and whatnot. So, it's my main profession.
So that was your kind of first adventure?
That was my first big adventure, yeah. And so my main thing is doing the adventuring. So that was, so after my plan always was to do the sailing trip and then come back and go to university and learn something. I thought, well, I'll do one more adventure, and I was inspired by another book. It was called Running the Amazon, about the first team to run the length of the Amazon, and it was a pretty amazing account. It was, you don't really realize just how difficult and dangerous and challenging the Amazon River is until you hear of people trying to run its length. And it starts 18,000 feet, and it's full of ice and snow and granite and canyons and white water. Yeah, there'd been many attempts before them, and all of them ending with fatalities. And so after reading that book, I thought that'd be cool to actually run the Amazon. So I started learning how to whitewater raft. I got a job as a whitewater guide in the Rocky Mountains, and convinced two friends to join me on this trip. And so we went, and we became the third team to run the full length of the Amazon in 86. Or not 86, 86 was when the first guys did. We did it in 2000, or 1999, 2000. And we were very lucky. Both Ben, the Australian fellow, and myself ended up writing books on that trip, which did very well. And we also created a documentary. We'd never done any filming before.
What were the books and documentary called?
The Amazon Extreme is the name of my book. Ben's is Three Men in a Raft, and then the documentary, we just came back with a pile of footage we'd taken, and there's two different production houses that made a documentary out of it. So one made one for National Geographic channel, and then the other was for CTV in Canada. So there's two different versions, and that made. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go in one more. We had so much fun going down this river. And for that, we used whitewater kayaks for the headwaters, or not whitewater raft for the headwaters, and then later on we used the whitewater kayaks, and then we used that same raft to continue down the flat water, which is kind of interesting. We put a little rowing station on it, so there's three of us, but one person would just be rowing. We made the oars out of bamboo. We slashed our paddles, which we used in the whitewater, to long sections of bamboo, and created a rowing frame out of balsa logs on the raft. But and then so after that, we went on and voyaged the Yenisei River, which is another beautiful part of the world. It's the fifth longest river in the planet. It starts in Mongolia, flows north up through Siberia to the Arctic Ocean. And with that, we used whitewater raft and 2 kayaks for the whitewater section in Mongolia. And then in Russia, we found a beautiful old, and this was sort of, we planned this in advance. We knew there were around Lake Baikal some beautiful old wooden boats. And so we found this lapstrake. It was a very heavy, long boat, which was falling into disrepair. The villagers that owned it actually gave it to us. They were planning on burning it. It was in such rough shape. And we put a little cabin on it, and we're rowing 24 hours a day because we had limited time before the river freezes over. So that was a 5-month journey. Now, the big one that we've done, since then we've done all sorts, almost all our expeditions are boat related, but the biggest one was going around the world by human power. Nobody had ever gone around the entire planet using raw human power. You know, there's always sails or motors involved. So the idea was to start in one spot using just muscles, go in one direction until you get back at that spot again. So that was a 2-year trip, which involved rowing across the Pacific.
You do that by yourself?
It was part of it was by myself, and part of it was with the second half was with my fiance. So that involved cycling from Moscow all through Eastern Europe and to Portugal, and then across the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean from Lisbon to Limon, Costa Rica, which was about 6,500 miles in the rowboat. So we really got to know each other very well. Julie became the first woman to row across the complete Atlantic Ocean, and we're also the first to go from mainland Europe to mainland North America in a rowboat as part of that. The other big aquatic section was the North Pacific, so we went across from Alaska to Siberia. Fortunately, it's not like it is now. I think we'd have trouble getting permissions to get through Russia. A colleague of mine, they were planning on this summer going through the Northeast Passage across the top of Russia, but their permits have been denied because of the political situation going on. He's Australian, and Australians have joined the U.S. with the sanctions that have been imposed, so they're kind of retaliating.
I see. Interesting. So that was cycling and rowing around the world, basically.
Yeah, so the overall route was starting in Vancouver, riding our bikes.
British Columbia?
Yeah. And riding our bikes up to Whitehorse, and then we canoed down the Yukon River to as close to Fairbanks as it gets. And then in Fairbanks we had our rowboat waiting, and our rowboat was actually a trailer sailor because it had to fit into our budget, which we purchased on eBay for $2,400, and we stripped off all the sailing hardware and put in a sliding seat rowing station on it, and so it was a trailer sailor with a few modifications. You can make it into such a seaworthy vessel, and compared to a custom-made ocean rowboat, which will cost you $30,000 to $50,000, this is the same price as an expensive sea kayak, and it's got the seaworthiness to it, cross a big rough ocean and carry a lot of gear too. So we used, it was a Laguna Windrose, which is an 18-foot, very nicely designed trailer sailor. And so we rowed it across down the remainder of the Bering or the Yukon River, and then across the Bering Sea to Chukotka, which is the northeasternmost state in Russia. And then it took almost a year to get through. Once we hit Siberia, the hard part wasn't over. It was just beginning, because you've got about 5,000 miles of roadless wilderness, which you can't travel in the summertime by human power because it's just bogs, pretty much impassable. So you have to wait for it to freeze up.
Yeah.
But it also happens to be the coldest area on the inhabited area on the planet. Yeah.
Wow.
So one of the towns we passed through, it's called Oymyakon. And the average, this is the coldest community in the world, the average temperature in January, the low temperature, without wind chill, is minus 52 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's pretty bitterly cold. So that's what you're waking up to each morning. And of course, there's days a lot colder than that going on. But it's still it's a really interesting part of the world, traveling through there and just getting to see all these different cultures.
So that was a 2-year expedition.
Yeah.
And you finished that in 2000, you say?
No, that one was 2004 to 2006.
Oh, okay.
So the Amazon was 2000, 2001.
Yeah, okay. And then you did one from someplace to Syria.
Yeah, Scotland to Syria. So the theme with that one was connecting to ancestral homelands. So my wife's family is from Syria, and my family is from the north of Scotland. So we thought it'd be fun connecting those two places. This is just shortly after we've gotten married, and a way to learn more about ourselves. It's just traveling slowly by human power and a boat is a pretty great, wonderful way to actually experience the land and the people within it. They seem like two very, disparate parts of the world. Syria and Scotland, but as far apart as you can get. But when you connect it, of course, with all the political issues going on in the Middle East right now, it seemed, back then it was much more stable, fortunately. But it really sort of for us and our experiences, it really creates a more of a human face to these areas that seem so hostile and we actually found that as we went through Syria, some of the friendliest and most wonderful people that we encountered were there. People just constantly inviting us in for food and dinner, and just wanted to get to meet us and learn. Which is so sad. And Julie's family, some of them live in an olive farm. They have this farm that's been in the family for generations. And
really?
They took us to the farm, and that's actually what inspired our more recent trip we did, which was to learn about the history of the olive as more of a cultural odyssey rather than a physical thing. And we wanted to end that one too in Syria, but we couldn't because of the civil war going on. Now, in the family olive farm next to the Turkish border, instead of it, being a serene place, there's militants hiding behind the trees and gunfire going off. And her the family we're closest to, which is Julie's uncle and his kids, they're in the middle of Aleppo, which is right in the middle of the war zone. So they're one of the last few people living in their apartment building. There's bullet holes in the windows, bodies in the street, and it's just horrific. They've got such a wonderful, beautiful family, and there's such nice people, and to think that they're in the middle, it's so different when you just hear it on the news, and all this nastiness is going on. It's so different when this is family that's in the middle of it all.
Wow. So when did you start kind of designing and building your own wooden boats for some of these adventures?
Yeah, so the first got obviously got very familiar with the traits of boats just through the adventuring over the year. I was a very avid whitewater kayaker, so learning the hydraulics of the water and the interaction of the boat on the water, everything from being kayaks, whitewater rafts, sailboats, rowboats, made me very comfortable in the water and very, very sort of in tune with the different ways that a boat will react. And then, of course, in the Yenisei River expedition, that was sort of our first bit of very rudimentary boat building. I don't think I'd even call it boat building. I think any boat builder would call it being barbaric with a boat. But we had this old boat that we just plastered with tar to keep it from leaking, and we built this little plywood cabin on it. And that's also when I first did sliding seat rowing. One of the guys on our team brought a sliding seat set, which he'd brought from his college of coaches. His old rowing coach had given it to him, and I'd never done any sliding seat rowing before. But it was such a great way to, just felt so nice. We had these big heavy larch oars that went with it, and even the oarlocks were just the oarlocks from our whitewater raft. But it allowed you to access all your big muscles, and it's a great way to go. So from then on, I was kind of hooked in that whole idea of, we do so many thousands of miles of travel on boats by human power, and this really works well for it. So we built our own first, true, fully designed boat for our expedition going from Scotland to Syria, where we needed a boat that didn't really exist in the market. We would have bought one, but there was we wanted something that could carry a bicycle and trailer system, so we could efficiently portage the boats and travel overland. And so what we developed, essentially, it looks like a kayak. It looks like a big kayak, much more voluminous than a kayak. It's probably more like a canoe that's decked over, but people always mistake it for a kayak. and it's got the hatches, so your gear is all watertight. It's big enough that you can stick the openings are large enough so that you can stick a full-sized bicycle and trailer system with the wheels off, and you have to take the wheels, pedals, and the seat off the bike in order for it to fit. But it's very seaworthy and fast. And then instead of having a double-bladed paddle drive system, it uses sliding seat rowing system. So it's that much weight.
Okay, we'll pause. Let's pause.
You got a hand?
Okay, we're back.
So it was so in short, it's just like a big kayak with a sliding seat rowing system. So you've got you get the benefits of several things. Like a kayak, your gear is dry, and it offers that buoyancy, which gives you the seaworthiness. And then it's got that benefit of the sliding seat system, which allows you to use all your big muscles and move it at a pretty decent clip.
Yeah. Wow. So now, so are you selling boats or kits, or what are you doing now, Colin?
So it's been a bit of an evolutionary process. Like our main business is the expeditioning, where we go our writing and we do motivational speaking. But the rowboat business we have is a sideline that's growing very quickly, and it started from the boats that we designed for our Scotland Syria expedition. After our books came out, we had a lot of people writing to us asking, are you planning and making plans for your boats? I'd love to build it. So eventually we received so many of these inquiries that we thought, well, maybe we should. And so we created plans for the expedition rowboat, and then which were very popular. And then I had a whole bunch of different boat ideas in my head, things that didn't exist in the market. And, at the end of the day, I'm just, that little kid still in there, just loving the idea of being able to go out and create. And so we've created 3 additional designs, and we're always coming up with new ideas and concepts. So,
cool. And Marty Loken's going to be building a boat here.
That's right, yeah. So Marty Loken's a fundamental part of one of the boats that we designed, which is probably the coolest boat. It's a camper rowboat. So it has a little cabin on it, and there's the idea behind it is it's a boat that you can actually live aboard on, but it can be propelled by human power. And so at the end of the day, instead of having to go ashore and set up your tent and do all that other stuff, you just drop anchor, get out your glass of wine, and start cooking dinner. And there's even a little kitchenette and a table that pops into place where the rowing station is, so you can do all your cooking and whatnot outside. And then there's a sheltered cabin where you can sleep at night. So it's like camping in the water. And it was quite a challenging design to do, because it's as you know, boat building is all about compromise, and really people like big spacious accommodation, but you can't do that. You have to miniaturize it, otherwise it's going to be a liability in the water. You need to make it streamlined and compact, offering comfortable accommodation, but at the same time not too comfortable, otherwise you'll be paying the price when you're rowing. But what we created, the row cruiser, it moves at the same speed as your average sea kayak, so quite a good clip in the water, and that includes when you have the contrary weather against you. But at the end of the day, it's just a much simpler setup for camping. And the nice thing about sliding seat rowing is when you go out a week-long trip or a weekend trip, when you come back, you're super fit. I mean, that's the reason why they've got rowing machines in gyms. It's such a great full body workout.
Yeah.
So, the stand-up paddleboards are very popular right now, and people like it from the fitness angle. But I honestly think there's probably nothing better than sliding seat rowing for really accessing all your big muscles.
Right. Yeah. So if people want more information about your books or boats or anything, where do they?
Yeah. So most of the information on our adventures is at angusadventures.com, and then our boat website is angusrowboats.com. So and
angusadventures.com and angusrowboats.com.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast today, Colin. It's nice meeting you. And
it's been my pleasure.
Anything else you'd like to add? Or?
I just want to say how much fun I'm having here at the Pocket Yacht Palooza. It's I really love Port Townsend. There's just so much creativity and innovative thinking going on here. So every time I come down, we live up in Victoria, so we're just across the water, but definitely isn't quite the same sort of energy around wooden boats up there. So for me, it's always a treat coming down and just seeing all these cool boats.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time today, Colin.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, Colin, for doing the interview today. It was awesome. to do that with you. I look forward to seeing you at the festival here in a couple days. So thanks again. And for those listening, Colin's website is angusrowboats.com or angusadventures.com. And there's also a new website for the kits and so on that are going to be sold of the row cruisers that Marty Loken has put up, and that website is rowcruiser.com. So check that out. In fact, there's even going to be a class in 2015 that you can take if you'd like to build one of these row cruising boats. The idea is that you can row the boat and then you can sleep in it at night. It's got a little cabin forward, but it's a very efficient rowboat. Pretty cool. They're going to be sold as a kit, and so check that out when you get a chance. You can connect with me by email, woodenboatdan@gmail.com. That's my new email address. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. If you search for Wooden Boat Dan, you'll find me there. And if you'd like to help support the podcast, if you make purchases on Amazon, go to this link, hookedonwoodenboats.com/Amazon, and then make your purchase. I get paid a small commission. I appreciate that. And also, there's a tip button on my homepage, hookedonwoodenboats.com, if you'd like to leave a tip through PayPal. I would appreciate it. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes also. And if you enjoy the podcast, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave me a review there. That would be pretty awesome. Also, I have an ebook called Get in the Wooden Boat Game, a guide for building your first boat. It's about 36 pages. You can buy that on my website for $4.99 as a PDF file. And to get to that, you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/ebook1. And also, I have a Kindle version of that book. So if you go to Amazon website and you go to the Kindle books and just put in there, Get in the Wooden Boat Game, that one will come up, and you can buy that for $5.99 if you prefer the Kindle version. The book's got lots of electronic links that take you to other places for more information about products and services and definitions and things like that. It's pretty cool, so I would encourage you to check that out. Well, thanks for tuning in today, folks. Great to have you on board the Hooked on Wooden Boat ship. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Hope to see you at the Port Townsend Festival this weekend. God bless and take care.